Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Halfback Dynasty. My name is Brendan. We are joined today with our co-host, Tyler Cox. Tyler, how the heck you feeling today, my friend?
Feeling good, Brendan. We got a great Halloween out here in Colorado, looking like maybe a more 1990s Halloween, looking like we're going to get some snow, some sleet. When we were kids, man, you had to earn that candy. It was brutal, freezing cold, horrible wind every year. You had to earn it. So feeling good. Excuse the pun, but I'm hoping for not a nightmare today in fantasy, man. How you feeling?
Yeah, I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good until about the 3 p.m. game start, because then that's when you have an idea if you're going to lose or you're going to win. But that's cool, man. That's cool. You know, I've been meaning to ask you with your 1980s horror collection, correct? Is it all 80s?
All 80s, man.
Wow, that's wild. Is that the most popular decade for horror movies, would you say?
I would say so. I mean, that's kind of I don't know. Some people find 80s horror pretty cheesy, so I think it comes down to preference. But I mean, horror fans would probably say that's kind of the golden era, you know, because, dude, if you weren't in a horror film or you know, made a horror film in the 80s, you weren't trying. I mean, you're talking, you had like Demi Moore was in horror films back then, like just everybody, you know. So I mean, I think it's great. It's fun. I'm not a real pop out scary fan or like jump scares. So, you know, if you're not into kind of more cheesy, fun horror, I could see how 80s doesn't appeal to you. But also, man, they had to make the movies back then. You know, it's all makeup, it's all props, it's, you know, there's no CGI. Yeah, when you really look at what they put together, it's pretty cool. And some of them did it on like a budget you and I could put together, you know.
That's what's up, man. That's when the producer has to also be the lead actor. just like when the coaches also have to be the player, the general manager,
man.
Like Jackie Moon and Semi-Pro.
You had your mom in the movie, your sister, your aunt, you know, it was that kind of stuff for sure. So
cool. Mostly slasher films, I'm assuming.
Kind of all over, man. The 80s covered so much that it's just, I mean, super unique ideas too is kind of what drew me into the 80s as a kid. You know, obviously I was a kid in the mid 80s and mid 80s up till, you know, late 80s, but just the ideas were super unique, man. Some of the stuff you're just like, somebody signed off and gave money for this movie with an idea of this, you know. It's just kind of funny. Like nowadays they'd probably be like, no thanks. But yeah, man, it's kind of funny. There's like, not to get off on a topic, like I said, anybody in 80s was into horror. I mean, there was multiple porn companies that released horror films, not porn horror films, but they made their own horror film with
They're taking advantage of the trend.
With their actors and actresses, and were legit movies, man. It was just, you weren't trying if you didn't make one, that's for sure.
Wow, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
honestly, funny. I mean, totally understand, because I have seen some older films, not just horror, but like horror films, but sometimes the acting is so bad.
Oh, so bad.
That is so good.
Oh, for sure, man. Yeah, I can think of many where it's just like, I think they're trying to like bring back this era of 80s, like rebooting 80s or making horror films 80s like now. I mean, there's a lot of them coming out, but it's just like, it's a different time, you know. They weren't trying to be bad. They weren't trying to be bad actors. They just were, you know.
Yeah, they just were. That was the times, man.
Yeah, but they were trying.
Yeah, just like in like 100 years from now, there probably won't even be any actors. It'll all be just computer generated.
Yeah, it'll just be computer, you know. It's like when we look up and down on some people's Dynasty rosters, it's like, hey, they're trying. It's just not working.
Hey, they don't know any better, man. At least they're putting a starting lineup together.
Exactly. They're playing, you know.
All right, cool, man. Cool. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Of course, I'm always taking recommendations. Don't know much about the horror films, but I think I got one movie in me tonight. So if you got a
Okay.
recommendation, Karina and I will definitely take a look.
I like it, man.
But
Do you guys hand out candy or not that nobody in your building
no,
does that?
I think our fronts. Well, I saw people last night with some buckets out. Since I wasn't home, we didn't really do anything.
Sure.
But not that many.
Yeah.
Where I live in this apartment, it's like really young families, like young adults, young families,
Okay.
probably like under 30. And if they have a kid, like 2 years old.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
yeah, and the trick or treating's weird around here. They actually have happy Halloween. I don't know if I said that on air yet. Holy
You did.
smokes.
You did.
But okay, cool. But yeah, so they like trick or treat in like businesses. So like for example,
okay.
all the bars, like the kids would walk into the bars.
Gotcha.
And then they get candy and then they just go to the next bar. It's super funny.
Yeah, I guess
Super
I've
funny.
never, I mean, growing up in the suburbs, obviously, small town, well, what was small town Colorado, I never really thought about like you growing up kind of more in the city. Yeah, it's probably totally different. Yeah, you probably
It's
go to
definitely different.
businesses and yeah, there's not like houses, I'm sure,
Yeah.
right there. So,
Yeah. So I grew up in a suburb as well. Well, born in Chicago, moved to a suburb, then moved back, and really different vibe. I think
sure.
the biggest difference is, as you mentioned, there's buildings everywhere on like main streets of businesses, and then you have like side streets feeding off the buildings that will have complexes or like
Okay.
3-story graystones. And it's a lot more difficult because it's more compact. It's not, you don't get as much of a thrill walking, 20 miles, working hard for that Snickers,
For
in
sure.
like 30-degree weather. So
For sure, man. Because there's like row houses in like downtown Chicago then.
yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, the kids looked like they were having fun yesterday, but I don't know. It didn't seem like it was super crazy lit. But hey, what do we know, man? We're not professional trick-or-treaters no more.
I'm not planning on going out,
Not when there's football on, man. Not when there's
No,
football
no.
on. All right, cool. So yeah, let's talk football. I'm glad you guys are doing well. I think that I want to start by addressing the Packers versus the Cardinals. I'm starting to really have mixed reviews on a lot of things fantasy wise. One, is Kyler Murray capable of winning big games and putting up big numbers against really good teams? Because in his career so far, I don't think he's actually won that many like super big games. Can you recall they didn't make the playoffs last year? He didn't put up that many points. I'm going to see how many points he put up while we get your opinion on this on Thursday night. But I don't think Kyler Murray's ready to be in the conversation with, like, for example, Tom Brady throwing up 30 fantasy points a week,
Yeah, I mean, we saw this last year, man. He came out and was just extremely dominant, lighting it up. Looks like the best quarterback in fantasy, above Mahomes, above Josh Allen, above Lamar Jackson. And then, I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't be thrilled or having Murray on my team.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we saw this last year. I don't know if he's banged up again, but when he lost the ability to run and scramble last year, his fantasy numbers went from, again, depending on formats, bonuses, things like that. In our league that has bonuses and is a 6-point TD, I mean, he's putting up 40 a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then it dropped down to mid 20s, teens, upper 20s, So, I mean, he's taking a beating. He seems to get hit a lot. He doesn't always make the smartest decisions as far as taking hits. So maybe he's banged up again, but I don't know, man. It seems like all the quarterbacks this year have been a little bit up and down at times. I don't think it's just limited to Murray. I mean, last week was
Patrick Mahomes too.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick Mahomes, I honestly went back because I got crushed last week. I mean, in our league, my game was over at halftime of the morning games. It was over. You could just tell that.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah, I mean, the guy I played had AJ Brown and Chase in the morning, and it's like, well, that game's over. And it was one of those where most of my team had played and very little of his had played. You knew it was over. And I was pretty frustrated, disappointed with Mahomes. And it's amazing that, even as long as you and I have been playing Dynasty, we always comment about what have you done for me lately. It was like Patrick Mahomes has been terrible this year, and I looked, he was the number one quarterback. So I just have this idea that it was like, oh, he scored 11 points today, really?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's all. And then I look back and it was like, wow, he's pretty much been in the 30s. I mean, I'm not sure you
Yeah.
could ask for a whole lot more, but
So it's
even
funny.
Mahomes has been,
He's been down.
he's
down.
He scored some late touchdowns in a few games that have really salvaged his games and his scores for fantasy. I mean, obviously, most people don't care about what's actually happening in the NFL. You're looking at your fantasy scores. So, but yeah, getting back, Murray, I still view him as a top 5. I would rather have Lamar Jackson. I don't know if I'd rather have Josh Allen. I'm not sure. Josh Allen to me is a little, he's kind of like Murray, I think.
Yeah.
I think he's a little bit safer because he's gotten so far away from rushing, which was honestly the first year or two what gave him such a good ceiling or floor for that matter. So
yeah, his completion percentage sucked his first year. Then he worked on it a lot, rushed and had a pretty decent completion percentage, and now he's actually playing like he's a good QB. He really is.
For sure. Yeah,
really
but
is.
I don't Murray sometimes I don't know. He's still young. I think he's still got a year or two before he hits his top potential. But yeah, I don't know. Again, I think you're fine rolling him every week. You have to roll him every week. I think you're fine with him on your team, better than fine if you're going for a title run. But
yeah,
as with most QBs, you got to live with it. I mean, I never, as a Mahomes owner, thought he would ever have a game with 0 touchdowns of any capacity. I mean, sometimes it is what it is. Fantasy is so up and down, and there's times your team just flat doesn't hit. There's other times you're going to score 180 points and be like, wow, my team is unbeatable. The next week you're going to score 75. That's just kind of the nature of the beast. And I think that's kind of the nature of just where we are in fantasy. And I mean, like, I feel Murray played okay, but yeah, getting away from fantasy a little bit. I mean, I really don't think you can put that game on him. I have no idea what AJ Green was doing. I don't understand. I mean,
and he's cut.
That was a perfect throw by Murray. He just never.
So
I don't know.
So as you mentioned, Patrick Mahomes is feeling down, and as I mentioned, Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray in one of my leagues, depending on format, is pretty standard 4-point touchdowns, 4-point per touchdown. He's QB1 right now.
Okay.
So I guess my point that I'm trying to say is that, is he ready? I mean, every QB could have a down week, right? But the best quarterbacks in fantasy football never have a down week. Never have 2 or 3 down weeks. Murray's already had 2. So against the 49ers, he did not have that good of a fantasy outing, 11 to 12 fantasy points. On Thursday, he only had 10 fantasy points. He's throwing 6 interceptions, which is less than Mahomes, and he's played one more game than Mahomes. But I don't know. His schedule is kind of tough, man. It's kind of tough. He's got the Rams. He's got the Cowboys at the end of the year. He's got San Francisco next week. Like, can we trust him to be a top quarterback asset? Can we trust Patrick Mahomes right now? You almost feel a sense of like, he's rattled, right? He's rattled. And like, I feel like there might be a game that he puts up a dud. And that's so very un-Patrick Mahomes-like. So
yeah, I feel watching KC on the red zone or whatever that, I mean, their whole team is just
beat, dude.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to take it to the extreme of what the Denver Broncos seemingly did to Cam Newton and the Panthers in that Super Bowl. That team was never the same. Cam Newton was never the same, but
he did not try to jump on that fumble.
Yeah, I mean, they're just off. I expect Mahomes to have a monster game today. I think he'll rebound.
Dude, they should destroy the Giants. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, so I think he'll rebound. And getting back to Murray, I think his upside gives you the hope for your fantasy playoff schedule, your playoffs, whatever, that, hey, man, he might have a down week or he could go for 50. Those are – it's very volatile, but I don't know. I mean, after what we saw from Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson, after he had the 55-point game in our
It was
league, he put up
nuts.
like 13. I
Hmm.
mean, you just got to live with it, I guess. I mean, you roll the best lineup. I mean, kind of segueing into that, people are always looking for upside or, oh, this guy has a great matchup, man. Just roll your best lineup. And I mean, outside of having, I suppose, Mahomes or Allen, I mean, Kyler Murray for most teams is your best lineup.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
yeah.
And to both of our points, Patrick Mahomes threw up a 7 last week,
Oh, it
7
was horrible.
points. I
Horrible.
mean, that it seems so uncharacteristic, like of
Yeah.
Mahomes. Like, so let me ask you this then. Moving forward, let's say we're doing a startup next year in Dynasty, Superflex League. Is Patrick Mahomes still the first pick overall? And at what point would you feel he shouldn't be the first pick?
I would still view him as the first pick. I wouldn't fault anybody for taking Murray. I wouldn't fault anybody for taking Allen, Lamar Jackson, any of those guys.
Sure.
Um, I think I mean I think Patrick Mahomes is having a down year, but
Hmm.
I mean, look at what that means. He's still the 2 or 3 QB. So regardless, I think he's still the number one QB asset in any format.
Sure.
Despite having a down year and you're still a top 3. I mean, you gotta like that. Look
Yeah.
at some of the out players, non QB players having down years. I would consider Calvin Ridley having a down year, and he's a QB, or excuse me, a WR. I think he was 42 last week. So
Hmm.
really think about that. Mahomes is not having a great year, and he's still a top 3. So I think he's still the safest QB asset. I could see the argument. I mean, Josh Allen's been huge the past 2 years. He's having another good
Hmm.
year. The thing is all the top QBs are so young that like age doesn't really play a factor. Like you could say, oh, you got to take Herbert or Murray because they're young, but I mean, they're like 2 years younger than Mahomes. It's not.
Yeah. They all got
Plus, I
at
mean,
least a
Tom
decade.
Brady showed you can play. He'll play till he's 50. So, I mean, if you keep yourself in good shape and stay healthy, age for a QB is not a huge factor, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially now we've seen that this previous generation on the 2000 draft year, they're coming up on the end of their career, but now there's a new generation that's going to take over. So, all right,
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, interesting conversation. I kind of wanted to go against the grain about my view on Kyler Murray. Obviously, I'd be thrilled to have him on my team. I'd
sure.
be thrilled to have Patrick Mahomes on my team. But at a certain point, though, you also have to stay on top of the dynasty game, and you have to realize that sometimes even what you consider as the biggest name this year is not the biggest name next year. So
No,
fantastic. Let's move into some running backs real quick. I was cool with Aaron Jones' performance on Thursday. I think he's a great piece for a contending team. I think he's still relatively cheap in terms of price you'd have to pay, just because the uncertainty of Rodgers in next year. I also view Austin Eckler in the same boat. I, for some reason, have never been a fan of Eckler. I think that he is just not a sexy name in a sense of I target bigger names that are top 5 finishers. But right now, Austin Eckler, who just had his bye, is top 5.
yeah.
Is he capable of sustaining this type of production with Justin Herbert? And will that offense still continue to be potent? Because if so, Justin Herbert has an argument for being one of the top picks in the Superflex startup.
For sure. Yeah, I think I'm with you, Brendan. I had to put my foot in my mouth multiple times, kind of own up to it on DLF that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an Eckler guy at all, but he's changed my opinion this year. I think he is a safe play the rest of the season because they've got nothing behind him. He catches
Mm-hmm.
passes. He's a 3 down back because of his pass catching ability and plays in a potent offense, that as much as they throw, they still rely on Eckler quite heavily, to be honest. So,
Yep.
yeah, for a contender, I think he's a top 10 running back easily the rest of the season. If you're
Mm-hmm.
a rebuilding team, I think you could sell him for a really, really nice return to hopefully jumpstart your rebuild. Kind of on a side note, I say it all the time. If you're rebuilding, don't do it around running backs. I would focus
Lesson
on,
learned for me, man. Akers,
yeah,
Dobbins, and ETN all on my
for
rebuild
sure,
roster.
man. Yeah, because they're just so up and down.
Oh, man.
Their values are all over the place. Look at what you could have sold Gibson for in the offseason. Look what you get for him now. After
Mhm.
7 bad weeks, people are like, I'm not touching Gibson anymore. You could have moved him for 3 firsts in the offseason,
Absolutely.
with the hype. But just that side note on running backs and rebuilding. As far as Herbert goes, absolutely a top. I'd make an argument for a top 5 or 6, depending on your preference of QB and a startup for Superflex. If you're a guy that doesn't like Lamar Jackson because you think he's going to get hurt, you don't like Kyler Murray because you think he's going to get hurt because he runs. Sure, Herbert's right in there. He's a top young QB. I think Lawrence has been very, very good in real life. I
Mhm.
don't think he's been so great in fantasy so far. So I could see people being down on him after people waited on him in fantasy for years. I think some people are very disappointed. I'm not saying I'd bail on Lawrence. I think that's a terrible decision. But just as far as a startup goes, I could see a guy like Herbert going above Lawrence,
Yeah, I think Lawrence has. Well, okay, let's back this up. I think the expectations on rookie quarterbacks to get the starting role for fantasy purposes are way too high. Yes, some rookies, example, Justin Herbert, can really come along in the first year, but I don't think anybody really expected that to happen.
No,
Tyrod Taylor
supposed to play.
Exactly. Tyrod Taylor got hosed, punctured lung. Justin Herbert steps in, has a pretty decent week, and he played so well that he kept the gig. So I don't think it's time to rule out Trevor Lawrence. I don't even think it's time to rule out Justin Fields. But I think that it would be a mistake not to realize that transitioning into the NFL is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
You are playing with the strongest and the fastest athletes probably in the world, right? And Justin Herbert, or not Justin Herbert, Justin Fields saying, the game feels slow. That was him being cocky, because for rookie quarterbacks, the game is fast, man. And the majority of the time, these young stud quarterbacks are on super awful teams because they're drafted so well. So I think what's going to happen, moving back to the Chargers, I think their team is developing very well. I think the Chargers, they beat the Chiefs, I'm pretty sure. I think the Chargers are going to become one of the top teams in the AFC. And I really think this is a contract year for Mike Williams. I'm sure they'll extend him. They'll extend Keenan Allen whenever his contract's up.
Yeah, he's
I'm
got
not
a couple
sure.
Years.
Yeah, do you think that they will keep Austin Eckler in a sense of these running backs get hurt and their contracts are literally the worst contracts in the NFL? That's what I don't know. I think that I think Justin Herbert could feed all of these guys, which we've seen.
Yeah.
And I view their offense as like last year's Buffalo Bills.
Sure.
That offense, and even this year, was so potent, right? Trevor Lawrence and Josh Fields could get to that level, but first they need the appropriate weapons. So I think Justin Herbert was brought into a dream situation.
For sure.
And I think that they're going to start contending. And honestly, I think Justin Herbert is going to be looked at as a top 3 QB. We're really talking about QBs today, man. I love it.
Yeah,
So,
you could definitely make that argument for Herbert already.
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
good quarterback.
Exactly. So what would you give up for Austin Eckler right now on a contending team?
I think he's going to cost essentially 2 firsts plus.
Okay.
Like you said, he's not the biggest name, but let's be real. A lot of people that are making trades, trying to sell assets, trying to buy assets, it's buy low, sell high kind of thing. Most people, fair or not, look at position rank. And if you were to click on Eckler on ESPN and it says RB5, that immediately drives up his price,
Mm-hmm.
So, look at somebody like we talked about a down year with Ridley. Ridley's a QB 40 or whatever. Still
Wide receiver
worth
40.
Yeah, still worth 2 firsts plus, but most people are going to be like, oh, he's not that good. He's not worth that, So it's very short-sighted, but yeah, Eckler 2 firsts plus, man. You're not going to get him cheap, that's for sure.
Okay, so at that point, if contending, sure, maybe. I don't know if I do it. If I'm desperate, maybe. But what other? So you probably view Eckler as a sell, correct?
Depends on your build. But yeah, if
Okay.
you're not contending, yes,
Let's say you're not a
absolutely.
top team and you're not sure if he puts you over the top. He's a sell, correct?
Yeah, because what, he's 26,
He's
25?
older. He's
Yeah,
older.
yeah, you have to.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's talk Aaron Jones again. Would you sell Aaron Jones? Is he a sell?
Rebuilding,
Yeah, just you're not
just
you're not
not
going to be
contending.
over the top contender. Yeah, you might make the playoffs,
Absolutely.
but not a favorite. Okay,
Absolutely.
Joe Mixon.
Yes, because he to me, he's still up and down. He's had a good year, but not a fantastic year. And people either love Joe Mixon or they hate him. If
Yeah,
Joe Mixon comes down the stretch of this season and has 3 bad games in a row, yeah, you sell Mixon now. Yes, I think so.
he does look good right now. He's getting some
He
good
does,
fantasy production.
which is
Okay,
great, but people are he's not like a Jonathan Taylor that if he had 4 bad games, people are still going to be like, I'd give you 3 first for him. I don't care.
absolutely.
Joe Mixon, we've played this game with him for 4 years
Yeah,
where nobody wants to touch him, or somebody wants way too much for him, or you still have some people that might pay for him, but
mm,
yeah, if you're not a contender, Joe Mixon's too volatile for me. Way too much.
okay. I'm sure this next one then is an obvious. Derrick Henry.
100%.
Okay, so
You can't build around a 20, soon to be 28-year-old running back. You just can't.
okay, last one. I agree. I agree. He could go downhill anytime. Okay, Ezekiel Elliott.
Oh, yeah. He's a sell.
Okay,
Yeah.
now would you buy these running backs for the appropriate price? If you are already have obviously, I know you wouldn't buy a running back if you're rebuilding unless your QBs and wide receivers already.
Yeah.
Would you buy? Would you feel confident buying Jonathan Taylor?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would want to have a very specific rebuild already in place. I wouldn't build around Jonathan Taylor, but if he was, let's say you have Lamb, DJ Moore, guys like that, plus a good quarterback, plus a decent tight end, and you have two or three flyer running backs. Sure, if you could get into the playoffs realistically and make noise as a rebuilding team, Taylor's fine. But if you're 2-3 years out, absolutely not. I wouldn't buy any running back 2 or 3 years out. No chance.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense because then their career's already done. Okay, DeAndre Swift.
Same thing. Yeah, I think DeAndre Swift's scary because when the receptions aren't there, his points are terrible. I own Swift in our other Dynasty league. He's the RB5, pretty standard. It's a 0.5 PPR, so pretty standard scoring overall. But I mean, obviously, I watch his stats every week, man. If he doesn't catch passes, his rushing
It's not very good.
lore is pretty bad.
He gets about
So
10. He gets about 10 attempts per game. He averages about 40 yards,
yeah,
and that's it. I
not a
mean,
player to make your pillar, in a
absolutely,
rebuild.
absolutely. But in a PPR league, he's
Oh,
a
he's great.
machine. He
Yeah,
could
he's
be the
great,
next
man.
Kamara. Okay, next
Yeah.
guy. Next guy. Najee Harris. Do you trust what could happen to Najee Harris after the season if Big Ben retires?
I think that's fair for every single person on that offense. I mean, the good thing is Ben Roethlisberger's terrible. So, I mean,
It can only get better.
yeah, the possible QB regression is not very big. I know people are concerned about what happens to Johnson and Claypool. It's like they're producing with a terrible quarterback now. What's the difference? So,
Exactly.
Harris, I think, is again, not a piece to make your pillar, but if you're a rebuilding team that's a legit playoff contender, not like a contender, but a legit playoff team, yeah, I think he's
You'd
a
go for it.
great running back to have. But, again, if you're 2-3 years out, you sell him, maybe not this year. I always tell everybody on DLF, like, some of those questions when people are like, do I need to blow up this team? It's like, well, it depends on what you can get. Don't just give away Harris for first because you want to blow your team up. It's all
Especially
about
rebuilding
return.
guys that could fit into your rebuild a little bit.
Don't force trades. Don't like, oh, I got to move Harris this week. No, you don't. Wait for the right move to come along.
So for next year, I think we're going to see a cycle of running back rankings. I really think McCaffrey's going to move down. Saquon Barkley is going to move down. Yeah. Derrick Henry's probably going to move down just because of the risk with his age and the amount of work he gets. So assuming that, name who you think will either be the top 3 ranked running backs going into next year, or who you think will finish the top 3 next year. This year, we already have an idea. We know Derrick Henry's up there. Najee Harris is up there. Cordero Patterson's up there. We're already over halfway through the fantasy season. Playoffs will start in 5 weeks. But for the sake of Dynasty, which 3 running backs do you think will be in the top 3 next year?
Top 3, I think number 1 is Jonathan Taylor. No question. Might take me a minute to shuffle through all these names here in my head. So
sure. So you got JT, my boy Miles Sanders, DeAndre Swift.
Sanders right in there for sure. I would say Najee. I think Najee Harris, if he continues where he is right now, will be a top 5, no question.
Okay.
Based on age and the age of the other top backs.
Absolutely.
More importantly, I think Swift could be up there. I think Nick Chubb still will be up there considering he'll be 25, which isn't young, but it's not terrible.
Yeah. You know what though? He also misses a few games every year with not super serious injuries. Something that I like to believe, and I might be wrong on this, when running backs sit out for like calf issues and things that don't typically linger, the rest of their body is also, getting rest for those 2-3 weeks that they're out. So like, although they're technically injured, it's not necessarily a big injury, but they also don't risk getting hurt in those 3 games they would have played with a serious injury. So like if you can withstand benching, your superstar running back who's injured, it could be good in the longevity of their career that they actually miss a couple games a season.
Agreed.
So it's a weird take.
I just pulled up kind of depth charts. I was just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. I would say the 3 most realistic based on age, every other factor you can think of would be Taylor, Swift, Harris. Okay. Just because they're kind of that next. I mean, Swift's 22, Harris is 23, Taylor's 22. Next year, amazing. McCaffrey will be 26, Kamara 27, Barkley
26, I think. Same age as Chubb.
25. Yeah. Cook will be 26. Henry will be 28. I mean, that instantly drops these guys. Barkley needs a huge second half for anybody to still view him as a legit top option.
It's his health. It's his health too.
Like you said, McCaffrey drops, can't stay on the field. Kamara drops. Fair or not, I mean, Kamara for the older backs has been the best back in the NFL for the older ones in fantasy. Yeah. He'll drop, though, because he's 27. Barkley, I think, will stay around 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there. Henry drops. It doesn't matter if he rushes for 2,000 yards. He's 28 years old. He drops. Eckler will be 27. He's great, but he's not in the top 3.
He's not one of those big names. You can probably get him at RB 15 again next year.
Chubb will be 26. I still think he'll be in the top 5 or 6. There's one name that if he ends the season well, I think could see the biggest jump, and that's Javonte Williams. If he closes the year with 200 or 300 yard games in a row, couple touchdowns sprinkled in with pass catching, he could be a top 6 if he ends well.
A lot of people are really high on him.
Yeah, because of his age. Again, he's only 21. Age plays such a factor in Dynasty, whether it's fair or not. But, I mean, I'm looking at a site here. Fantasy Pros has Williams at number 15 RB. His production has not supported that, but he's 21. He looks like he'll be the number 1 guy in Denver next year. And that plays a factor,
Yeah.
You're playing,
Melvin Gordon's done.
even when you're contending, even when you're building a contending roster, everybody, maybe besides you, is playing the long-term game, even if they're still contending. Like,
Mhm.
you wouldn't want to move a bunch of young assets this year, even as a contender, that are still good, that, oh, I
Mhm.
kind of could use this guy now. Like your team, a DeAndre Hopkins, who I truly think looks like he's slowing way down, whereas you have
Mhm.
Deontay Johnson. You probably wouldn't look to move Johnson for
Nope.
something win now because, you're
He's
going to
gonna
have to
fill in.
replace Hopkins sooner rather than you can't, even as a contending team, if you went out and bought all these veterans that might give you the biggest push this year, that's a risky game because in 2 years your roster could be just a disaster. You don't own enough draft picks to just constantly recycle an entire roster. So
Great point. And yeah, DeAndre Hopkins is scaring me a little bit. So
he
speaking,
doesn't look like, he looks slow. He just doesn't look like the same. I also, you can tell he's extremely frustrated, and I think that's affecting his play. But I mean, even on the Thursday night game, his stats would have been horrific because, I mean, that coverage where he got like a 40-yard gain, I don't even know what that cornerback was doing. That should have been picked.
yeah.
So,
To be
but
fair,
yeah, he just looks
Hopkins
different.
was hurt. He was hurt a
Yeah.
little bit that game,
Well,
so
and
he
to
did
put
sit out.
himself back in, I don't know if you read that. The coaches told him to not play. He just straight went back into the game. So who knows what
He
happens
just
there?
ran onto the field.
Yeah, as a coach, I mean, I
I
don't
wouldn't like that.
think you can put up with that because why doesn't everybody else do it? I would
Mhm.
hate to say you got to bench one of your best players, but maybe you do.
Maybe you do set the precedent.
Hopkins
Okay,
isn't going to be around forever.
very true. Hey, he deserves a ring though. So okay, so which wide receivers would you rather have over who you claim will be the top running back in Jonathan Taylor? Which wide receivers would you rather have rostered now than Jonathan Taylor?
I mean, for me, obviously, I like to construct my team around wide receivers a little bit more. Jonathan Taylor is one of the few running backs. I mean, obviously, he's untouchable in most leagues, but
Mhm.
I would love to have a piece of Jonathan Taylor. But even with that, I would rather have Justin Jefferson over him. At this point, I would take Jamar Chase. I mean, Jamar Chase looks ridiculous. I mean,
He does look pretty good.
he's gonna be the number one dynasty WR next year. It'll be him and Jefferson,
Sure.
1 and 2. Um, I would probably take AJ Brown over Taylor.
AJ Brown's been weird this year.
He has. I think he was banged up those first few weeks. The last 2 weeks look like AJ Brown again. He's just a stud. And probably not a popular opinion. I'd probably take CD Lamb over Taylor.
Sure.
I think if Lamb continues what we saw last week, which, sometimes Lamb just doesn't have the targets. When he does, he catches everything. He's explosive. If Lamb continues up, Lamb will be untouchable. So I would take, for me, the top three young dynasty receivers. We're talking young, maybe not overall, but Jefferson, Lamb, and Chase are three people I would build any team around.
So by that logic, do you think Jamar Chase is the number one dynasty asset in a one quarterback league?
I would still give that to Taylor. I mean, as much as I build around wide receivers, that's not always a super popular thing. Running backs are always more valuable because there's just less that you can rely on week to week. I mean, there's 5 receivers a game for every team that produce. It's ridiculous. So I would still give that to Taylor. I think Taylor's the number one dynasty asset in a single
Sure.
QB league. But Chase is, I mean, again, if you're not necessarily contending this, I would rather have Chase over Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs. I'd take him over any of those guys.
Sure.
100%.
Makes sense. I mean, that things are cycling. I mean, Tyreek Hill still has a good couple years left.
Yeah,
Devontae
he's
Adams,
27.
yeah, he could see a depression very quickly.
Yep.
DeAndre Hopkins. It's just I'm not sure if there's like a set year amount when we really start to cycle. Obviously, players are cycling in rankings every year,
Yeah.
but at a certain point too, there's like maybe 1 out of 3 years where we see that significant change. And then the other 2 years leading up to that third, we slowly see guys rise and slowly see guys fall. And I just
Yeah.
feel like we're seeing that in almost every position right now.
Agreed.
It's the turning the corner at quarterbacks, as we mentioned, all those young superstar QBs, all those young running backs that we mentioned over the guys who have been the top guys for 3-4 years, all the
Yeah.
young receivers. Like it's just no matter how long you play Dynasty, it's very tough. And this is only my 4th or 5th year, right? So I'm new to seeing these cycles, right?
Cycle's
But
tough.
yeah, so it's very weird. No matter how long you play, like guys who used to be for sure things every single week for 4 years, you can't trust them anymore. And it sucks. Yeah, it sucks to call them a bad dynasty asset, a bad fantasy asset, but that's the truth. At one point, Big Ben was a superstar, and now you probably can buy him for a third in a super flex league.
That's what makes Dynasty tough, man. You have to get ahead of it. We talk about it multiple times on this show. You have to give yourself a realistic picture of your team. If you think you're a contending team, and I understand if there's a ton of injuries, whatever, I understand to an extent, like, okay, you've had a tough start, but some teams I see that are like, oh, I think I should be a legit contender, but I'm 2-5, and you look at their roster and it's like, you're not. You're 2-5.
Go get the first round pick.
Yeah. So I mean, guys, like you got to get ahead of it. Devontae Adams, unless you're a legit,
you should trade him this year for sure.
Unless
regardless,
you're a legit contender, I'd be looking to move him. Diggs, I could go either way, but look at guys like Julio Jones. Anybody that's held Julio Jones to this point, you've held too long. He's worthless. I wouldn't even move a third for Julio Jones at this point. He can't stay on the field. He never plays. And another like Odell Beckham.
Yep, OBJ.
He held way too long. When he started to decline, I remember a bunch of people are like, I can get a first, but that's not enough. It's like, it will be.
Yeah.
It will be. And I mean, there's still people that talk about, I'd still like a shot at Beckham. It's why?
It's like Josh Gordon, baby.
Yeah, why? So you got to get ahead of it. Same with running backs. I mean, running backs are a little tricky because there's not as many that produce. So guys like Henry, if you're contending, you just flat have to hold. And when he's done, he's done. He's done on your team.
I view running backs similar to QBs in a super flex league, as in when trading. Like if I'm trading a top quarterback in a super flex league, I am for sure getting one back. Or obviously a QB of lesser value, because I will never trade a quarterback and not get one back. Same with running backs. If I'm trading a stud running back, since they're so difficult to find, I am looking to get at least like, I'm trading a top 5 RB. I'm looking for like a top 15, top 20 dynasty RB at least.
Sure.
And like probably a couple first round picks, hoping one's early. I would never trade a quarterback without getting one in return. I would never trade a running back. With wide receivers, however, since there's a surplus, I wouldn't mind pairing a couple wide receivers for a stud running back, because I probably got a few more wide receivers that I could flex or throw in.
Man.
Yeah, that's wild. That's wild. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, as you called it, the transition of ages from one kind of set to the next is very tricky in Dynasty. And, like I keep harping on, you have to be realistic with your team. If you think you can contend, but your team's only scoring 85 points and the league average is 107 a week, I mean, you're probably
time to make some decisions.
Yeah, and it's hard to take a kind of a zoomed out look at your dynasty team, and it changes so much that it makes it even tougher,
So here's the deal. Here's the deal. I'm looking at our league right now, and I'm looking at some of these teams, right? What's interesting about our league is that knowing certain values, like for example, knowing how difficult quarterbacks are to find, okay? This league clearly treats quarterbacks like a super flex league, right? But I'm looking at Jason's team. Went to the championship last year. Now he's in. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll say he was in the championship last year. Now he's in last place, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, it's a variety of different things. But I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I need to make a commitment and I need to probably sell off a lot of pieces. And yes, we're against selling young studs when rebuilding, but sometimes that's the only type of return you would get is worth a young stud.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So like
Yep.
I'm sitting here knowing that somebody would pay a boatload for Lamar Jackson, I would sell him, man. If you're 2-3 years out, yeah, I know you think Lamar Jackson's going to be in the league for 10 years, and that's fine to build around him. But there's a pretty good chance that I'm sure you could maybe land somebody in the next 3 years when you're ready to contend that's similar to Lamar Jackson on top of all the assets you got. So I don't know. In terms, I guess I'm referring to like commitment. Like if you're committing to a rebuild, like I think he also has Deebo Samuel.
Yep.
Deebo Samuel screams sell to me right now, even though he could be really good if he keeps this pace up. Hey, good for him. But if I'm rebuilding, I could probably get 2 first plus for Deebo Samuel, and I could more than likely go find next year's Deebo Samuel because wide receivers are a little more out there to find. Does that make sense?
I think it makes perfect sense. I think in 90% of the leagues around the nation, you could probably do that. I mean, as you've kind of found out with this league, I mean, getting any huge return for almost anybody is nearly impossible, you know? The more and more you've talked about possibly shopping McCaffrey, I've always been interested to even know what people would offer you because it's not going to be.
Dude, I got offered like a first plus, and I was like, nah.
Yeah, and that's kind of
rather
where
let him retire.
Our league is that, I mean, even rebuilding, our league's just brutal like that, man, because people just don't. I think we've all been in it so long, and this league's been going for so long. We've all made bad trades over the years that you're just almost terrified to make a wrong move. That because we've seen trades like you're looking at my brother's roster. My brother traded Hill, Nick Chubb. He's traded Tyreek Hill twice. Nick Chubb. He's just had these systematic, like 2-3, probably a year and a half worth of deals that have brought him to this point, and his team's a mess. You know, and I think a lot of people, and he'd tell you that too. You know, I'm not talking.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to roast his roster at all, or tell him what to do.
It's just a roster to look at that has good pieces, but also needs a lot of help. You know, because
so in terms of committing to a rebuild, and you know, obviously you are able to make big trades. He makes big trades. There's not many people in the league that do. But my point being, like, just for the sake of this conversation, not suggesting he should actually do it. But okay, Lamar Jackson in a 1 quarterback league shouldn't really be that expensive. So I could see holding him in a rebuild, right? In a regular 1 quarterback league. But in this league where he's valued as like a top quarterback as a super flex league, that's what screams sell to me, because somebody's going to give up a boatload for him because of the price and the demand in our particular league. So that's what interests me. And that's to end this, that's what wanted to bring up Mike Gesicki. That's what makes me want to bring him up. Okay. We've talked about him for months now, honestly. And it's baffling to me. Obviously, we've talked about the offers you've made. We know the offers you were making to me were completely unfair in my favor. Well, you were overpaying and I still declined. So I'm sitting here thinking, you know, there's multiple tight end hoarders that could sell 1 to 2 tight ends and really elevate their team or jumpstart their rebuild even further. So I guess to me, I'm struggling to understand the commitment aspect, and not just in our league, but with owners in every other league. I think people don't understand that being mediocre in dynasty football is literally the worst thing you can do. That's the worst position to be in, year out. Even if you make big trades and it backfires on you, you had just as much of a shot as becoming a dynasty contender yourself year in, year out. So
for sure.
I'm struggling to understand why people don't fully commit and why no one's taking you up on your huge offers for a tight end. You know what I mean? It just seems odd to me. And I'm not trying to roast anyone by any means. Obviously, we all have different strategies. But you should be able to give up a boatload of stuff that low-key hurts your team more than it helps and land a mediocre tight end.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that is exactly what you're trying to understand is exactly what I struggle with. That if you have all these assets that you can move, and somebody isn't willing to pay quite as high a price as you'd hoped, but is willing to give X, isn't X better than just continuing to hold and hold and hold? That's what it's great to have all these assets, and it's like my team with WRs. I can afford to move some if the right offer came along,
but the difference is you're willing to move some of those guys for the right offer,
for the right price.
No one else is willing to make them. So the right offers have been sent to a lot of people in our league.
Sure,
it has been.
Sure,
but their definition of the right offer is a significant overpay. But at a certain point, you're losing that value because of the fact that you're declining overpays and letting them sit on your bench. That's like me taking an L on Julio Jones. Heck, if I were to sell Julio Jones for a third, you know what I mean? Like, heck, if I'd sell Derrick Henry for 2 firsts, because I'm rebuilding, that's probably an undersell, but I'm losing that value in the meantime because I know that maybe next year he's not worth the 2 firsts. So the point here is that I would rather have some sort of value that I can help in my starting lineup or upgrade certain positions rather than let these players sit on the bench. And I'm struggling to understand why people aren't moving a lot of assets they can. You got to consolidate.
And I think some of it in our league comes down to, just being attached to your team. I think some people
I'm not attached to anyone.
Yeah, no. And a lot of
I'll sell anyone, dude.
A lot of owners can separate that, but in our league, I figured I'm gonna have to overpay for a tight end, so I'll overpay for what I feel could be a really good long-term one. I legitimately offered Calvin Ridley and 2 firsts for Pitts, which I think really helps that owner's team because she already owns Hawkinson. So she has a good tight end, one you can build around. But I guess if you don't want to move that asset, I understand that you just don't want to do it. So, because I struggle with that, I've had people offer me really good trades in the past for some WRs that I'm just like CeeDee Lamb. I'm flat not moving CeeDee Lamb. I'm flat not moving Justin Jefferson. I don't see the point, so I can understand and respect all that, and I think that plays a factor too. So I guess that leaves us where at you trying to make a deal on air here? What are we doing with Gesicki here?
So that was the goal, was to lead up. I wanted to save the last piece, so I think we led up into it very well. So Dawson Knox is out this week. My only other option is Tyler Conklin, and
who's had some games, honestly.
He has, but I'm in a position. There's like 4 teams that are 4-3, and there's like 3 teams that are 5-2. So this week is literally the most important week to get some separation. So let me ask you this. Would you be interested? So you offered a first plus for Mike Gesicki, correct?
Yep.
You originally offered a first, and you were considering a first in Ridley for Gesicki and Sanders, which we know is a significant overpay, generally speaking, but in this league.
And I just can't do it, man, because I just think Sanders sucks.
So what would you pay for Dawson Knox and Sanders? Would that be of interest in acquiring? Like, for more reason, I would sell at a more reasonable price than selling Gesicki, because, dude, without Gesicki, man, I'm stuck where you're at.
Sure.
There's no way to get anyone.
I wouldn't make a move for Knox just because his target share, like we've talked about and you've talked about as owning Knox, if the TDs dry up, it's pretty ugly. And I feel like I have guys that are in that tier. Knox has been carried by touchdowns, which is great, but that's not always going to be there.
Sure. So now you understand the predicament I'm in. If
Sure.
I sell Gesicki,
100%.
So now by that knowledge, because I'm sketched out starting Knox too, right?
Sure.
First off, he's been injured the past. Well, he was on bye last week and injured. He's out this week already. But now that's the thing is like I can't accept anything for Gesicki besides an absurd overpay because then I need to try to go out and find a tight end and hopefully land a better deal. If I were to sell Gesicki right now, the first thing I would do is start hitting up every single owner, and maybe they like someone on my team more than they like on your team. Which I mean, you've got great.
Well, they just don't think you're crazy enough to pay the prices I would pay. Like I said, I don't know what you would be quoted for prices versus what I was. It could be. Yeah. I'm the only person dumb enough to pay Ridley and 2 firsts for Kyle Pitts in our league. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, I wouldn't pay that.
Nobody else would.
I wouldn't pay that.
Nobody would.
Okay, so here we go. Here's the question I would leave you with. We have 50 minutes to game time. I'm very, very free before the games to actually sit and make a decision. What is the absolute most you would pay for Gesicki? I cannot just take a late first round pick. You're going to make the playoffs, so maybe it would be like, a mid first if you get bounced first week. Sure. But I cannot accept just a first as a contender myself.
Yeah, like I said, and I think I sent you a text yesterday.
You're going to ease off a little bit?
I understand where you're coming from. I'm trying not to – I don't even want this to come across wrong. I'm trying not to buy into the price range of our league. Just because a couple owners that are demanding a lot, I don't think means everybody else has to. So
I'd sell Gesicki for a first in any other single quarterback no tight end premium league. Yep. I would do it in a heartbeat.
You said you need kind of some younger wide receivers. I offered that first and KJ Osborne, who I know is not by any means a guarantee. Who knows what happens with him, but this is the first year he's really played, and the kid looks pretty good. And, I'm comfortable with that offer. I think it's a fair offer. I appreciate that you've acknowledged that it's a fair offer.
It for sure is.
Yeah.
But I can't do it.
That, I've tried so hard to get a tight end in this league that I guess if my tight end is Evan Ingram and Jonnu Smith, those are just my tight ends. I don't want to damage my overall build because, I like Gesicki and he's on quite the hot streak. But if I overpaid significantly and he kind of comes back to where he's been the last few years, where he's 3 points to 8, you're probably thrilled, and I'm devastated that God, I made another bad trade for a tight end who's not that good. So.
Absolutely.
That was kind of my offer that I was comfortable with. And
you had a reality check. So,
and I understand from your side that maybe that's not as appealing as what you need because you're a contender too with a tight end behind him that's risky as well. But I kind of got carried away because, like I said, I legitimately lost that one game because of my tight end. He scored 0.5 and I lost by 3. You lost because of your tight end. And I don't know how I would feel right now, Brendan. I think I'd be excited to have Pitts, but had Crystal accepted 2 firsts and Ridley, I don't know how I would feel right now. Would I still be like, all right, I got my tight end, or would I be like, God, what a bad trade that was,
Yeah.
Let's say honestly, Pitts comes out and scores 5 points and Ridley scores 30. You're going to look at that in a very small snapshot and be like, well, that trade was a disaster.
Absolutely. But you got to look at it this way, is that it would make it would benefit her more to make that deal than you. You're assuming all the risk.
Sure.
She's getting arguable wide receiver 1, and she's getting 2 firsts on top of that. So it seems like a great deal. So, okay, I'll end it with this. I know you got to get going. If I get Noah Fant, which I'm not going to lie, I've been talking to Joel a little bit I'm interested in dealing McCaffrey. So our teams don't really line up to become good trade partners, but there could be a solution there. I'm 100% requesting. That's sad that I'm requesting Noah Fant as a primary piece in a deal for Christian McCaffrey. but
Yeah.
let's say I get this done. If I get this done, I'd immediately turn around to you, which I've mentioned, and I would offer to sell one of Gesicki or Fant, which I would be able to do at a more reasonable price. Is a first round pick still the deepest you would go on either of those tight ends?
I would move a first for Gesicki, yes. Fant, I live in Denver, man. I don't know. Fant seems, I'm not even going to say that Gesicki isn't the same as all of the tight ends not in the top tier. Gesicki could easily fall off once, Parker gets back, their whole receiving core gets back healthy. Who knows what happens to him?
Sure.
So I think even at first is a huge gamble.
So
why I was willing to pay so much for Pitts was age, what we've seen, and the hope that you could just plug him in for 10 years. Gesicki, I think he's a starter in the NFL, obviously, but I don't know. If he slows down, am I going to feel like, I can start Gesicki over Smith or Ingram? I mean, then they're all back in that tier of,
sure.
Well, I hope I get 3 points today or 4 or whatever,
Makes sense. You want to guarantee. So that's how I'm looking at a deal for McCaffrey is I'm trying, and I'm going to reach out to other teams. Like this week is going to say, honestly, some teams are going to fall down. Some teams will climb up. And I'm trying to think multiple steps ahead because I view Gesicki and Fant as probably pretty similar this year, probably in Dynasty, similar rankings.
Sure. Yeah.
And I would look at that as another first round pick and maybe plus something in the deal for McCaffrey. So let's say I get 2 firsts and Fant. To me, I would turn around, sell Gesicki to you for a first. So that's 3 firsts. The problem is I obviously need a contending piece if I'm dealing McCaffrey. So what I'm going to do is after this week, I don't think I'm going to sell Gesicki. I really need him just as much as you do.
Sure.
And I think hopefully by this week, teams will see where they're at and maybe they're willing to move pieces that they wouldn't have if they didn't know if they were contending or rebuilding. So I will tell you this as a parting gift, I will look for a tight end in return for selling McCaffrey because I think you and I could really benefit from making a deal around a tight end I have or one that I will get. So
agreed. Yeah. And I mean, there's a part of me that, as the weeks keep going by, like I was interested, like we talked about last week, how Gesicki was going to do. Played extremely well.
He did. He looked really good out there.
Yeah. Does that continue? The thing is, the more and more people say no, it's almost protecting me from myself. That I'm not going to make this outrageous trade and then 3-4 weeks down the road just be like, man, I should have held that first, or something. But we'll just see how it goes. I mean, I understand the boat you're in 100%. Why would you trade?
And I want to make a move, man. Like I appreciate all the business we've done together in the past. Yeah. We've made trades with each other that clearly one side looks a lot better now than the other. You've won a couple, I've won a couple. And that's why trading that's why even making small trades it's building the rapport with the trade partner. And if I'm a lot easier to work with than somebody else, you might come to me with a better deal than you would with someone else. As you mentioned, your prices are sky high. My prices are probably going to be a little bit better if I reach out about the same players. So I am going to go out of my way, try to get a tight end, because I know I'd be comfortable selling one to you, and that overall would increase the value of me selling a stud. So,
well, and I can't tell you how much I honestly appreciate that you've told me multiple times the offer for Gesicki is fair and an overpay.
Yeah,
that alone makes it worth it.
Hey, man, it's all love over here.
Maybe I'm not like out in left field thinking my offers are good when they're not.
I've played enough dynasty leagues that I can average out values, and different players have different. Some players are incredibly overvalued in one league; they're incredibly undervalued in the other. Sure. Bottom line is, from playing in so many leagues, you can kind of average out values overall. And I think that, again, this is a big week for a lot of teams. So I'm
It is.
interested to
It's
see
huge,
what
man.
happens today. And if I lose, I've got some big things to think about. 4-4, lots of teams ahead of me, more points scored. So,
I
we'll be
feel
making some changes.
I feel you, man. I felt great at 4-1. Now I'm 4-3, and it's just like,
Mhm.
God, is my team as good as I thought they were?
The answer is we'll find out.
Well, probably not week to week is the answer, right?
Oh, cool, man. All right. Well, hey, good luck today.
You too,
Great talks. By the way, last week when we were talking about a bunch of tight ends, it was National Tight End Day in the NFL. Who would have
Yeah,
thought?
that was perfect, man.
How
And some
funny.
of them, there were some big performances on National Tight End Day there.
Insert Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
Dope.
Yeah, like when I was sitting watching the games with everybody last week at my parents, it was like, damn, I wish I would have landed Pitts. Like on that day, it was like, I was really wrestling with the Ridley and 2 firsts.
Yeah.
And on that day, it was like, yeah, I should have made that trade.
But today it's not going to look like that. Don't worry.
Yeah, who knows?
So cool, man. All right. Hey, well, yeah, good luck. Good luck. Good luck to everyone watching. Tyler, we'll get this content up right after the video, and we'll look to do another episode next week, my friend.
Sounds great, man. Have a good red zone day and happy
Yes,
Halloween.
sir. Yes, sir. Hey, and just remember, you're in this for life. Peace. Uh-oh. Now it's the official goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.